welcome to a new episode of DE Editors Chat. This is Kenneth Wong, Senior Editor for DE 24/7. And Brian, self-introduction again, please.
And this is Brian Albright. I'm the Editorial Director of DE 24/7.
Very good, Brian. Today we are going to go through some of the acquisitions that took place, and we'll discuss the consequences of them and how they might affect our markets and the products that the people are familiar with. Which one should we start with? What do we talk about?
Well, Kenneth, I actually wanted to ask you about one of the more recent ones we saw, which was Carbon had acquired ParaMatters, which is a generative design software maker. We've seen a lot of activity around generative design in our markets, and I know you did a bit of a deep dive for the website on this. So what can you tell us about what Carbon is getting in acquiring ParaMatters?
Right. Carbon is Carbon is an additive manufacturing focused software, a hardware maker, of course, and it has its own software as well. But it turns out that its software's strength, forte, is in generating ladders. So if you have a certain volume and you want to fill it with ladders, and this is automatically created for you. But what they're getting from the acquisition is actually generative design. Generative design is not exactly the same as ladders. So I think it makes sense. To me, in that way, I can see why the new software, the new generative design software is going to complement Carbon's existing lattice automation software. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's the case too, and it's been interesting. You noted in the article that we've seen a number of folks in the design software space acquiring some of these types of capabilities, like PTC and Frustum, Hexagon, and Altair had both acquired generative design tools, and there are also some standalone generative design companies, Materialise and Topology, and a few others. Normally, what we've seen are folks sort of in the more general CAD and design space picking up these tools because there's some demand for them. So it's interesting. I guess it's interesting to me to see this, 3D printing company picking up this tool, and I think it's unclear right now, sort of how the market will shake out. Will we see these generative design capabilities mostly coming from traditional design software providers? Are we going to see them more coming from third-party vendors or from the 3D printing companies themselves? Because clearly there's a need, and the need is that most traditional design tools aren't really optimized very well for additive manufacturing. At the same time, generative design isn't just for additive manufacturing. It can benefit other manufacturing approaches as well. We're kind of waiting to see where generative design capabilities are going to fall in terms of which companies are going to really win this market.
Right. I can see the interest in the CAD companies very clearly. Companies like Autodesk or Dassault wanting to bring on board some kind of generative design software. They'll either try to develop it in-house or they'll go out and acquire somebody that is already a leader in this niche market. By the way, now that I think about it, I don't think there are a whole lot of well-known, well-established generative design packages that are available for acquisition. In that sense, it seems like Topology remains one of the few things like that, and that's gotta be probably on the shopping list for either leading CAD companies or for leading 3D hardware companies that don't have a solution like that in their own in-house portfolio.
And I'll point out too that certainly based on general industry data and our own readership surveys, the use of generative design is still fairly low in the market. So the number of customers really leveraging these tools from any of the vendors is still fairly small. So it's a very fragmented market, and I guess we're still going to be waiting to find out how it shakes out. But clearly, on the 3D printer side, on the additive manufacturing side, I think there's just a recognized need for better design tools.
Good point. Let's move on to the next item that we have on our list here to talk about, and that's Materialise, another AM related topic. Materialise buying a company called Identify3D,
Right.
right?
And this caught my eye because we haven't talked about it all. The vendor community doesn't talk about it a whole lot, but this notion of digital manufacturing, which additive manufacturing is part of, but the idea that the designs and the production capacity can be more flexible and fluid and be transferred more easily, begs this question of, well, how do you protect intellectual property and how do you protect design? How do you make sure that this type of technology isn't just used to, create a lot of counterfeit products or cause other sorts of disruptions in the supply chain because you can't quite be sure of the validity of the part or the design. And that's what the Identify3D sort of directly addresses for Materialise. It's supposed to encrypt and trace digital part movement to help make sure that counterfeits don't enter the supply stream. And I'm there have there hasn't been a lot of other sort of activity on this front that I've seen. So it'll be interesting to see what the market makes, what the market makes of this in terms of the customer response and how much the vendors in the space are going to sort of promote the idea of having more secure solutions for this because they haven't necessarily made it, talked about it openly for obvious reasons. I think it's a security challenge that isn't necessarily addressed very well by a lot of the products out there.
Right. Materialise recently introduced a cloud-hosted software. Well, I mean, they have always had software, but they repackaged it or they created a platform and launched that COAM. I think it's called COAM or COAM. I'm not
Right.
sure how it
Right.
would pronounce, but that software is cloud-hosted and is a software specifically for people who want to produce mass customization and use what they describe as serial AM manufacturing. So we're not talking about using AM for prototyping or one-off kind of printable parts anymore. We're talking about churning out hundreds of thousands of perhaps even millions of parts in large volume. And I wonder how the Identify3D's component fit into this. What does Identify3D offer that complements this?
Well, I think, from my understanding of it, it's a way to sort of just keep track of where the digital part information has gone. And in that way, and they didn't provide a whole lot of detail, and obviously, probably for competitive reasons, they're not going to give too much of a look under the hood. It sounds almost a little bit like the idea of blockchain, and that um, you have some sort of guarantee of the legitimacy of I'm assuming the digital files that you're receiving and that are being passed back and forth.
Correct. I think they talk about in the press release. I remember reading that Identify3Ds offer, among other things, data integrity and traceability. So we're really talking about making sure that the 3D file that you're using to print from, you know what the source is, and you know that this is the correct thing, and you know this is the uncorrupted source. So this is, I guess, one way in which a feature like that would fit into somebody who is trying to churn out uh, large volumes of AM produced parts. So to
Right.
me, that sort of makes sense.
Right. And it'll be interesting to see because I think, particularly, with the advances we've seen in the ability to share this information and then print parts, production parts at scale, and also some of the other developments we've seen in the market around, scanning, CT scanning and three-dimensional scanning for reverse engineering applications. There's certainly a opening for a lot of counterfeiting of parts and products that has been made much more easy by some of these technology developments. And I'll be curious to see what other ways, both in terms of software and also physically securing designs or identifying parts and products that the market's going to come up with, because it seems to me right now it'd be much easier than ever before to make very good copies of a legitimate part and sell them.
Indeed. When it comes to 3D printable parts, the file is the key. Once you get a hold of the file, you would be able to print it with, granted that you already have the printing, a printer that is capable of churning out the same quality of print.
Yeah.
Let's move on and talk about the next item on our list. This is PTC, the parent company of the CloudCAD company Onshape, buying CloudMilling Cam. So really, even though it's PTC making the acquisition, what's really going to benefit is the Onshape users and the Onshape customers. What are your thoughts on that? Any initial thoughts, Brian?
Well, I mean, I think it's a fairly straightforward addition of CAM, cloud-based CAM functionality to what's already been a fairly strong CAD offering on the cloud. I'm not really all that familiar, actually, with CloudMilling in terms of their market or sort of their background, but this seems like the next logical step for Onshape to me.
Yes, when I spoke to Onshape people, I found out a little more about CloudMilling Cam. It really is a small company founded and run by a father-son duo, Mike Johnson and Ryland Johnson, and they have they're known to the Onshape community because many of the Onshape users have to rely on partner CAM products or other people who provide CAM plugins to do their CAM job, since Onshape, the package itself, doesn't have CAM. But buying CloudMilling Cam, of course, adds that, and now it becomes part of Onshape, the Onshape's offering. I have a feeling that in the past, for example, judging from the way they do it with their acquisition, in the past when they acquired MyGenius, sort of like a rendering technology. Eventually, it ends up as Render Studio. And when they bought an ECAD company, eventually it ends up as PCB Studios. So it wouldn't be far-fetched to imagine at some point when they have worked out all the integration of the technology, we may be looking at a CAM studio for
Mhm.
Onshape users. The interesting thing would be that Onshape also has other partners that develop CAM plugins. Now Onshape will have its own official CAM offerings inside Onshape. So how would these relationships work going forward is up in the open.
Right. I think it probably, in some way, also then better positions Onshape against some of the other um, CAD vendors that have cloud offerings that already had cloud-based CAM plugins or products. You know,
That's right. Case in point, Autodesk Fusion 360 or
exactly.
SolidWorks with its own CAM already built in. So yes, yeah. The last thing, let's chat about TechSoft, the company TechSoft, which is known for its Hoops 3D software suite. TechSoft buying Redway3D, which makes RE SDK, I think that's the name of the product. What are your initial thoughts on that?
Well, I guess maybe for our listeners who don't get too much into the weeds on the how their software works, TechSoft 3D has tools that are used by other vendors whose tools you may be using now, like Hexagon and so.
Right.
And this acquisition, I guess, is targeted for the Hoops Visualize a bit of TechSoft 3D and should give them, more ray tracing based, improved rendering and real-time visualization, I think is how they're promoting it. And that's certainly much more in demand as we have folks doing a lot more 3D modeling and a lot of sort of rendering and visualization within their design workflows, AR, VR increasingly being part of the design review process. I think that's probably what's driving this.
I think you're right. I think you're right. Um, Hoops, like you point out, there are a lot of leading CAD companies that are already using Hoops as the engine underneath their products. Hoops products could be used to develop mobile application, viewing application, or actually modeling application as well, and graphics application as well. So really, this one is going to Hoops Visualize. Hoops Visualize is going to get photorealistic ray traced rendering from Redway3D's technology here. I think that's what it's happening here. Um, let's talk also a little bit about some of the trade shows that you and I will be going, because the next episode will probably be talking about the news from those conference, which is where are you going next week, Brian?
I'll be heading off to the IMTS show in Chicago. I'll mostly be spending time in the additive manufacturing pavilion and maybe the software pavilion too. I've never been to IMTS, so I'm very much looking forward to it. When I joined digital engineering in 2019, not too long after COVID arrived, and a lot of my travel got canceled. So this is my first opportunity to get out to IMTS, and I'm very much looking forward to it. I hear it's quite an experience. They have a lot of manufacturing technology on display, a lot of robotics technology on display. So a lot of fun things I can hopefully get some pictures and video of, and put them up on our social media feeds.
And I will be heading to Autodesk University at the end of this month in September. It'll be in not New Orleans, as I used to mispronounce the name of the city. I got corrected, and it's New Orleans. So I'll be heading back to New Orleans. In between having coffee and beignet and gumbo, I'll try to get the best scoop on Autodesk technologies. I have a feeling we'll be hearing a lot about generative design, because that happens to be lately their focus. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
All right, well, I'm looking forward to hearing what you find there, and we'll certainly have to keep our eyes open for more acquisition news because there seems to be plenty of it this year.
That's right. It's shopping season for people with people with deep pockets in their corporate coffer. Well, thank you very much, Brian. It's always a pleasure to chat with you. I'll talk to you again soon in the next episode.
All right, thank you, Kenneth.
Okay, until next time, this is Kenneth Wong for DE 24/7, and we are out.